Hey, Polly.
Hey Greg, how are you?
All right.
That was a quick start.
We're on the ball today. So we have another great podcast for us today.
Oh yeah, who is it?
Yes. So today we have Rights, who you probably heard of or you may not have heard of.
What does it stand for?
Rhode Island Tutoring and Educational Services. I could be wrong.
Oh,
I could be wrong. I think I'm missing something in there. But luckily, we have the co-founders on today. We have Halley and Lisa from Rights. They're going to come on and talk about their tutoring and dyslexia certification services.
oh.
that They had this. I think I'm saying that wrong too. I'm all mixed up here today.
Maybe you've got a little
Yeah,
dyslexia
yeah,
today.
it might be. It might be.
Temporary
But
dyslexia.
Lisa and Hallie are definitely going to get me all straightened out and verify whatever mistakes that I'm making in my entry.
Great. I'm very excited. I've never heard of them. So.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, as small as we are in Rhode Island, there's so many services that are out there for everyone to get involved in. So here's another one. So without further ado. Today, joining us on the Totally Preventable podcast, we have Hallie Levenstein, the Rights Co-Director, and Lisa Bigney, also Rights Co-Director. How are you doing today?
We're
Great, thanks.
Thanks for inviting us.
This is great. I feel very energized and ready for today's podcast. I have to start off because in our introduction of you, I said rights. Can you please tell us what rights stands for, please?
Sure. Rhode Island Tutorial and Educational Services.
Makes sense.
But that can be a mouthful, so we think rights is often a nice way to just cut to it.
Gotcha. And like we always start off our podcast, can you each tell us a little bit about yourselves and how you got to where you are today?
Sure. So I was a special education teacher, and I have a specialty in dyslexia. And I decided to start a business by helping dyslexic kids after school. We were very small when we started, and just helping kids back, 30 years ago, there wasn't a lot of information or help for kids with dyslexia. So I decided this would be a great thing to get started helping kids after school and during the summertime.
And then when the business started to really grow, back in 2007, Lisa brought me on board when I was switching gears. I do not have a special education background. I have a literacy and history degree from college, but that kind of left the world open to me to explore. So I didn't really know what I wanted to be when I grew up. But I've always been an avid reader and loved language. And when I started to learn about the type of instruction that we do at Rights for dyslexic students, I was fascinated, and I actually did end up getting trained in it. So I kind of came in through the back door and wear a lot of different hats with marketing, the financial side of things, as well as I've also worked with students who are dyslexic and done teaching as well. So kind of soup to nuts.
Wow.
Can you tell us a little bit about the services you offer and how you cater to different students' needs?
Sure. So as we said, we began about 30 years ago as specialists in working with students with dyslexia, attention deficit disorder, other diagnosed learning disabilities. But today we have a large group of over 50 teachers with different trainings and expertise, so we can offer support to students with a variety of learning profiles. Our group supports kids from kindergarten through adult learners. There are special education teachers to work with students with complex learning issues, to academic support teachers for students who want to improve their grades, to train test prep teachers to help students prepare for standardized tests such as the SAT. We have different tutors for reading, spelling, writing, math, study skills, Spanish, and lots of the high school subjects, including SAT and ACT. And we provide wraparound support for parents as well, helping them understand their child's learning profiles, how they learn best, how to get services their child needs from the school, how to support their child at school. We also have partnered with several other local organizations, such as the Boys and Girls Club, to provide services to students and to training teachers as well.
Yeah, we're working with a local organization that provides training for teachers, and what we partner with them and offer students for the trained teachers to work with in their practicum, and then they potentially, when they finish their practicum, it's possible for them to become a rights teacher. So we offer that. We also offer workshops and webinars both to parents and to teachers. So we're offering informational pieces to them through that. We also are doing workshops for the students. So there's a lot that we cover and that we're offering to our community.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That is, I can't even break down. There's so much that I want to know just about, the programs that you just mentioned in there.
Mhm.
That is amazing. That's great work.
I'll also throw in there, so we have over 50 teachers working at Rights, and we serve about 400 to 500 students a year.
Wow. Now, are the rights teachers, are they spread out in different schools? Is this one particular area that they're at?
Yes.
Lisa, do you want to talk about that structure?
Sure. So we actually have a brick and mortar learning center where maybe about a quarter of the teachers work, and then we have teachers spread out throughout Rhode Island and work with kids in their communities so they don't have to travel far after school. We're right, some teachers are on the border of southeastern Mass that can come to us as well, Attleboro, Seekonk, places like that. But we
So
have
they're typically in the
out.
libraries in the area.
Yeah.
Some of our teachers have their own home offices, so the student may come to them there. Very occasionally, a teacher will travel to a student's home. And we do have teachers who also go into the schools, which is also less common, but we do have several school contracts where the teacher will go into the school. And then finally, we also have virtual instruction ever since COVID. We are very hands-on, in-person kind of an organization, but I will give Lisa some props that she really pivoted during COVID and moved a lot of what we do online, which is hard to do. And so we were able to offer that virtual component. And so we even have a teacher who moved to Florida who's still working with our Rhode Island students. And we have another great teacher who's in Massachusetts, but able to work with our Rhode Island students as well. So it really gave us some more flexibility, which was eye-opening to us. And really does add, in case a student can't make a session, but they're, maybe they're not feeling well, but they're well enough to do the tutoring, they can do a virtual session instead of in person every once in a while.
That is great. With all of the services that you provide, what are some of the more common challenges that students are facing in their academic journey that you'll see?
Yeah, I think there are a few. So the first thing that I would say is the pace of school itself. I think that we can all see that there's a lot, it's almost quantity over quality in many cases. Sometimes that can be coming from the fact that in public school, there's a lot of testing and benchmarks that they are required to meet every year and to administer. So that can add to that need for the pace to be pretty fast. But we also see it in the private schools as well. And that can be, you would expect that maybe in the high school level when they're getting ready for college, but we're actually seeing it happening throughout the grades. And it's kind of alarming that we're starting to see it even in as early as first grade. And that is something that I think would be totally preventable. But that's not the only thing that we see. We also see the way that the instruction is delivered to the students in the classroom may not meet the needs of every student in that class. They all have different learning profiles, and if a teacher has a preferred method of delivering instruction, they also don't have the time to deliver instruction in a lot of different ways on the same concepts. They have to keep moving. And we know that school teachers are trying every day to meet every student's needs in front of them every single moment with the instruction that they're giving. But they just don't have enough hours in the day. And even though there's been a lot of progress with with the way schools are structured, they still have classrooms that are too big and not enough trained professionals, staff members with different specialized training to teach the kids. So that is another challenge that they have. And then there's another one that is what we refer to as soft skills, which are skills that aren't necessarily taught explicitly, but probably should be. In fact, in our case, we know should be. But they're important for students to learn. And one of the examples of that is study and organizational skills. That is something that teachers just expect that students will know how to organize their materials, organize notes, take notes, get ready for tests, find their assignments online now, use all the different platforms that teachers require and juggle all of that. And we are finding students don't know how to do that. And we actually work with a lot of kids on study and organizational skills because it's something that they need. And then if you imagine that you have a complex learning profile where it takes you longer to get the information that you need, and you may have some organizational issues in your learning profile, it's that much harder. So that's another area. And then if you take all of that, think about the pressure that's on these students every day. They need to be able to perform every day at every moment to get the information, to store it, and then retrieve it when they're asked to. And if you're a student who does learn the way your teacher, your particular teacher is delivering the instruction, then you're going to thrive. But if you're not, then you're not going to thrive and you're going to be struggling. And we see some students that get services when they have a diagnosed learning difference. They may get an individualized education plan or an IEP, and they may get some services through school. So we typically at RITES will work with students who may not qualify for an IEP, but they're still struggling. They may be sort of falling through the cracks, if you will, or they're teetering on that edge. And we even are working with students who do have an IEP, but it's not enough. They need even more. So we see those challenges, and then that's where we're rising to meet the challenge as best we can in all those areas.
Do you do any student assessment? I am a mom of a dyslexic kid who
Yay, you.
I had to we live in a small town, so a younger grade went to the teacher and said, wow, I think something's not right with the way she reads, with the way she takes stuff in. And she is the third. So I was told, oh, you can't rate her against her siblings. Everyone's different. And I was like, yes. And then I was told, she's very cute. She will be fine in life. And that just infuriated me. And so until I struggled until 5th grade, and we finally had her assessed privately because she didn't have any, she wasn't disruptive in class because she was a good child. They did not feel like she had a learning difference. But we finally had her assessed in 5th grade, and she got an IEP. But it was a long process, and I didn't know who I could go to help.
Yeah, and I wish your story was unique. Unfortunately, it's very common to us, that same thing. But Lisa, you want to talk about our assessment versus that assessment?
Sure. So all of our tutors will assess kids before they start working with them. But to be diagnosed with a learning disability, you do need an evaluator, which is a doctor, to have that firm diagnosis, which will make sort of a roadmap for the family and the school of how that child learns and what methods they're going to be using with that child. So those evaluations are really important. I think parents are their best advocate for their own kids. Your own kid, and maybe the teacher doesn't want to, compared to siblings, but what the norm should be. And that's when you definitely should speak up, ask for the scores at school and discuss more. And I think you did the right thing. If the school isn't ready to do the evaluation themselves, then to go to a private evaluator and bring that information back to the school in order to get what your child needs.
We also know, though, that that can be a challenge, because if you can't afford that outside assessment, that evaluation, that can be very hard for families.
It was
But I
expensive.
think, yes, it is. And it's not often covered under health care. Different evaluators don't get, the insurance doesn't cover it. So that can be tricky too. But it is such a good roadmap to have. That's a term I like to use too. And it's because I also had my kids evaluated, and I would come back to that. It's a great reminder for everybody of what the issues are and how you can intervene in what ways in order to be able to give that child the success that they can unlock for themselves for the future. And I think that Rhode Island Tutorial and Educational Services is really, I think we're pretty strong at supporting the families in that process, because we do understand both the school perspective and the parent perspective. And we are kind of a liaison between them. We're not professional advocates. We've had advocates on our staff who can help parents with that. But we also are able to sit with the parent and give the language that is productive for getting those services from the evaluation. We often help parents interpret the evaluation. So we can't give the diagnosis ourselves, but we can certainly give helpful information based on working with the student of what we see. Even students that don't get an evaluation, we can't, again, diagnose, but we can provide the right intervention because we recognize what's in front of us and what it needs to be done. And so we can show effective teaching approaches that the parents can ask for at school as well, and get the school feedback on that. So there are a lot of components that we can help with and support that parent. And the biggest thing I think that you mentioned, we can help them not feel alone.
Mm-hmm.
We can really help them feel supported. And I would say that's a value add that Rights gives. It's not a for fee thing. It's just it's the virtual or real hug of you're doing the right thing, and you are your own child's best advocate.
Right, because when you're not a professional in that situation and schools are telling you, no, they're fine.
Mm-hmm.
Who am I to say, or they would also ask at IEP meetings, well, what other services do you think she needs? I don't know.
Right.
I don't know. Yeah.
Right. And I'll also say there is such a wide range with schools in throughout the state, and actually throughout the country, of that approach to how to serve the students. There's a wide range of response that we have experienced. It can be from, everything's fine, to really being proactive. And so we've kind of worked with all different types of approaches. And that's something where it's very hard to identify ahead of time. How's this going to go? Mm-hmm. Right. So there's a lot of, the other thing we help parents with is what kinds of questions to ask when you start a new grade or a new school, what to look for, so that you don't get too far down the road and it's feeling like it's too late, which we'll always say it's never too late. We work with adults too. We've worked with adults who have gone through all of school, graduated, and cannot read.
Amazing.
Yes.
That's a problem. And also totally preventable.
Yes.
Yes. So I really love the term complex learning program, and it's probably something that's been out there forever, but I just love that term. I have a child who during elementary school had his organization was, he's got his diagnosis, but his organization has always been a thing. But he's got a great teacher that helped him out throughout this last elementary school year. But now going into middle school, that teacher is no longer there. It's a whole school, whole new environment, and now there's lockers involved, and trying to guide him on how to organize your locker according to your classes. I see myself talking to him, and his eyes are just glossing over like, oh no, what am I getting into? So I think that that organization skill that you're providing is something that's definitely lacking. So that hats off to you for that. That is just amazing.
Thank you. Can I actually share a story with you about one of the students that we have? And it ties into what you're talking about with the study and organizational skills. But it's going to be a little bit of a long story, if you don't mind, because we have known and worked with the student for quite some time, which is not necessarily typical. Typically, you know, a student might come for tutoring services for a subject that they're struggling with, like in high school. So it's going to be a very temporary amount of time that they're spending, maybe a few months, possibly a year to 2 years on something that is not quite so strong for a student. But for our kids that have more complex learning profiles, they may be with us for a longer period of time. And sometimes that can feel daunting to parents, and we don't lead with that because we never know how long we're going to be working with a student. It really depends on the individual and how they take in information and how we're instructing them, and the pace can be determined by all sorts of factors. So we can't ever promise this will be done and better and up to grade level by X date, but it can be very fluid. And so that's what I'm going to get to with this story, is that it is a fluid process. So I'd love to tell you about Jacob. He's currently a sophomore in high school. And I will come back to it, but the study and organizational skills is the key point for him right now. But when we met him in the summer before he was going into 3rd grade, and he was struggling to read. And he has a single mom who was trying to get things from the school, but she just was feeling like it wasn't enough and it wasn't right and she needed help. But she really couldn't afford our for-fee services. And so fortunately in 2008, when we became nonprofit, we had started as a for-profit, but in 2008, we became a nonprofit. And one of the main goals of that was to be able to serve any student who needed our services, not just those who could afford it. So Jacob was a perfect example of someone who could benefit from our sliding scale that we're able to make. So he was able to participate in a small group summer program that we had that was designed specifically for dyslexics and ADHD students who are struggling to read. And it's designed with a very specific approach, a multimodal, multisensory approach to reading. His resource room that he was in at school, kids had all sorts of things that they needed help with that weren't necessarily that they were struggling readers. He is a really bright kid who couldn't read. And that's not necessarily, the kids had way different levels of being able to take in information and all different profiles in the classroom. So he didn't really feel like he was with kids like him. And it led to some social skills issues and some self-esteem issues. And so when he came to our program, he's like, wow, these kids are just like me. And he took off. He improved in many areas that are the core areas for reading. He improved dramatically in the 5 weeks. So one of the things you need to know is recognizing what the letters are, and being able to name the letter and being able to say what it says. And so naming the letters, he improved by 16% in 5 weeks. And in knowing what the letters sounds were and how to unpack a word and be able to read it, he improved by 30% in 5 weeks. So once mom saw that, of course, at the end of the program, she said, I can't not have this when he goes back to school. He's just going to lose it all. So fortunately, again, our sliding scale, he could have tutoring with us year round. And that's where, our families pay they do have to pay a little bit, because we found that if it's free, we don't always get people committing to it. So they pay, if they need the maximum aid, they pay $5 each time they come to us. And it's normally $65 for tutoring. So he was able to do that. And we worked with him in reading for several years. And he really improved to the point where, up to middle school, we're doing a research project. We're in a collaboration with a research organization, a person who started a particular type of text called NOAA text, which is designed to make it easier for dyslexics and ADHD students to read more fluently. And then also, Lisa, a university was involved in the research study as well, right? And a group that does,
University.
University of Michigan, right? And they do, and then materials, so that they help develop materials as well with Noah Text. So we were doing this research project, and our students in the summer were participating and using Noah Text for their reading in the program. And Jacob stood in front of us and picked up the Noah Text book and started reading with fluency and full expression. And Elise and I don't think we're ever going to forget it. It was so emotional. I could not believe this kid, from what I met him as this shy, very hopeful third grader to this very confident middle schooler. And I just was blown away. But he still needed some support beyond that. But now at that point, it shifted more towards writing, written expression, being able to express his comprehension in writing. So we were able to give him a different right specialist in writing, and then also in study and organizational skills, because also note taking and structuring everything that he needed to know for the classroom and for tests was something that he needed to focus on. So then we shifted to that. And so he's still working with us today on those skills. And we can also foresee he's going to need those high stakes tests, exams coming up, and needing to subject specific, very deep dive into subject specific concepts for high school. So we, again, will have the specialists that he will need if he still needs our support. But today, we used to work with him very intensively. Today, we work with him once a week. Sometimes it's every other week. He's fine. But a lot of what we do is exactly what you were talking about, Craig, where they are helping, our teacher is helping him to get his assignments from different platforms, from different teachers, make sure the deadlines are all in a place that he will notice and pay attention to, make sure that he has all the materials he needs to do the assignments, to get his writing done, crafting a better essay, all of those kinds of things. And even, again, probably some locker help too. But what's pretty interesting about today's classroom is a lot of it is online, so you don't have to bring books back and forth. It's helpful. It's very helpful. It's not as easy for kids who struggle with online platforms.
Mhm.
So that was my very long-winded,
I love it.
but very happy story, because we're really proud of Jacob. He's on an amazing journey, and that the self-confidence and self-esteem is that piece that you can't bottle that, but that's exactly what and why we do what we do happens.
That is
Loved it.
great.
You mentioned how some kids struggle with online technology. There must be, I know, my daughter was diagnosed, 12 years ago, and there was a little bit of technology help for her. Has it increased? Are there great measures to help online these days, or is in person better and more physical things better to help?
I think it depends on the student. Because of COVID, we've done a lot of virtual teaching, although we still prefer in person, and most of our teachers do in person. I think there's a lot to say about touching things and manipulating words and all of that. But the technology has grown hugely over the last few years, so that a lot of the things that we do physically, you can sort of replicate online as well. So we have invested in online teaching software where kids can drag letters and make words instead of having the actual cards in front of them. They can do it online. There are other programs that we also have accounts for where it does make it multimodal, because they're listening, they're looking, they're moving things online. So it does become a lot more interactive. Some of the software we use also tracks what the students are doing, what their errors are, which can really be good data to give to parents, schools, and it informs our tutors really what should our next lesson look like if they were having trouble with this while they were practicing at home with the software. It gives them something extra to do at home. Especially in the summer, we have a lot of parents who travel and ask for something simple. You know, we used to send them with books and papers that would never come back and get lost and never get done. So at least they can, you know, fire up their tablet and go ahead and try get on the software, and we can see what they're doing on the back end as the teachers. I think also the biggest change is the access to resources for teachers. You know, it used to all be word of mouth. You'd have to go and get training. Now there are lots of things online for teachers, some of it free, some of it not, that they can go to and get resources if they're really stuck on how am I going to help this student learn X skill. You know, you can research that. You can have a ready-made lesson that you can adapt to your student that you can find online. There are platforms for teachers to share ideas, so you can connect much more easily with other people that have done it.
I'm gonna do a shout out for Lisa right now too, because Lisa is amazing at finding new resources, that new tech resources, and assessing them, training herself on them, and then offering the training to our teachers. So she really kind of, it's almost, there's so much out there, it's overwhelming, and she's really very good at distilling it down to what's useful and ties into what we do and is a good dovetail. And it kind of gets the noise down, and she gets the teachers focused on the tools that are going to work best. And then we through Rights offer that access, so the teachers have it. As a Rights teacher, they have access to those online platforms and those tools and the programs, and so that's really helpful. But I also want to add that, you know, tech and online are very tricky, because, you know, if you have an antsy second grader, it doesn't go so well when you try to do a virtual lesson. And then especially like with COVID, when parents, and they still are now, parents are home working, but they have to make sure that the student is staying on task, that the technology is working, that you don't have glitches and outages and things like that. But I also go to all the way to the other end of the spectrum, where the SAT is now digital. So they pretty much, you can request for it to be pencil and paper still, but for the most part, they are expecting that students will take it online. So we even teach kids how to do that. And when, again, we had to get trained, our teachers had to get trained, our SAT specialists, on the new digital platform and how it's different from the old version. And then once they're trained, we're able to offer that. And we were, again, Lisa got them ahead of the curve, so that now that it is the digital format, our kids are much more prepared for that who come to us.
Yeah, thank you, Halley. And I also say a shout out to our teachers who really have learned how to teach well online when it's necessary, because it is definitely a different set of skills.
Yes.
And we're hoping that the software that we use really supports that need when we have it for kids to work online. It has also reached like out of state kids. We've actually had kids from England, because we've had, you know, we have these special ed specialists for structured literacy who don't find it in their community and have opted to use our teachers online for that. So it's given sort of a breadth of different areas that we're able to help kids in.
That is cool.
Yeah, and it seems like there's a lot more resources now. I know when my daughter needed help, there were like 2 big programs that we had to choose from, and we had to find someone that was trained in that. And we were just fortunate that we had a retired teacher, shout out to Mrs. Quinn, who met my daughter every morning at 6:45 to work with her before school. But had she not been around, those were the only options. You know, teachers would work with her to help organize her and stuff, but they said that she needed to take part in one of those 2 programs.
Right.
So, but it seems like there's like many more options and resources and methods these days.
There are, but they're still the tried and true Orton Gillingham and Wilson are multi-sensory structured sequential programs. They're out there. There is now structured literacy, which is based on the science of reading. I am going to let Lisa talk about that. She's way more well-versed on it than I am, but it takes what Orton Gillingham and Wilson are about, and it's the big picture encompassing all reading skills needed. And then take it away, Lisa.
I think it's changed since, I went to college, just first started as a teacher where, whole language was what you were taught to do in school, what you were taught to use with your students. But over the last it's been several decades, actually, there's been a rise of something called the science of reading and all that research, which is by many fields of study, educationists, educational people, neuropsychologists, data researchers, cognitive researchers, lots of different kinds of research that the methods are confirmed about how children best learn to read. And the research includes evidence supporting all the steps of learning to read that meets the needs of all learners, really. So it's really been a change in the last few years with the Right to Read Act and the new laws, and new companies creating structured literacy classes for people to get trained in this, and what the science of reading research has shown is the best ways to teach children reading.
And, mind you, we've been doing that for 30 years, but it's nice to know that finally the legislation and the resources are catching up and people are becoming more aware. So it does make our job a little easier to explain what we do and to do what we do, because now people are a little more aware of it, but we still are doing a lot of education and awareness about it. But it's just nice to have this research that's been done, and we can send people to read more about it. We provide that, we provide links to that too, so that there are lots of different ways that people can learn more about it too, which is helpful.
Yeah. And I think with our experience for doing it for decades now is that while new teachers are trained in structured literacy and it incorporates a lot of multisensory hands-on learning itself, just the method, but we tend to go beyond that because we've been doing it so long. We have so many games and activities and hands-on things that we can give to our teachers so that their lessons are very multimodal, as we say. They're visual, they're auditory, they're kinesthetic or hands-on, so that students are learning their skills through many different ways. And this increases their retention, their memory of the skills, and it really engages them in the lesson, because one of the hardest things to do is tutor kids after school during the school year, after a full day. So we really need to,
or after camp, the whole day of camp.
After camp in the summer. Yeah.
But
Very much that active learning.
But I also would add too that with all those materials that we have, and then our expertise, we're able to say, "Ooh, have you tried this one?" And we put it in front of them. They're like, "Oh, no, I haven't." And it's great for our teachers, because I really think our rights teachers are really very engaged in helping their students. Obviously, they really want them to succeed, and so they're relentless in figuring out, how am I going to get to this student? How am I going to get through? How are they going to get this information? And so if something's not working, they can grab another tool, literally a hands-on activity that reinforces the concept. And if one isn't working, they can try another one, or 2 or 3 or 4. And for each lesson, they'll have another set. And so it really does keep it fresh. And then if kids have a favorite, of course, the favorite's there. It's going to be the reward after you've gotten through the part that was a little harder. So it's really nice to be able to have all that at their fingertips. And then I would also say, but the thing that's been very interesting too is, as we have more teachers join us, we're finding they have a pretty big toolbox of their own that they come with. Many of them, they already have things that they like to use, and they introduce us to new ways of coming at the information, and then we are able to share it with our other teachers. So it's really a consortium of these creative, inventive folks who are really helping kids. And it's I think the rights teachers really enjoy that sort of collegial aspect. They're not working in isolation, and I think that probably contributes to why we actually have pretty good retention rate with our teachers. They tend to stay with us when they come to us and when we hire them. And so we're very grateful for that because we're always teaching each other too.
Now, we've mentioned this a few times in the podcast, but for those who may not know, can you explain what dyslexia is and how it could affect a student's ability to learn?
Sure. So there's actually a technical definition, which I'll try to explain. So the official definition is that dyslexia is a specific learning disability that is a neurobiological in origin. So that means that it's not about being lazy or not trying. It's really that the dyslexic brain is wired differently and does not learn to read and write the same way as someone with a neurotypical brain or someone who does not have dyslexia. And it's characterized by difficulties with accurate and or fluent word recognition, by poor spelling and decoding abilities. So that means that the person with dyslexia doesn't read fluently or quickly, and their spelling and their ability to read out the words is weak. And the difficulties typically result from the deficit in phonological component of language that is often unexpected in relation to other cognitive abilities and the provision of effective classroom instruction. So that means that despite the student being intelligent and the class is in a classroom with effective instruction, the student is still struggling with reading, writing, and spelling skills. And the consequences may include problems in reading comprehension and reduced reading experiences that impede the growth of their vocabulary and their background knowledge, all which are going to show up on standardized tests as them doing very poorly. And there's research about this because the more students read, the better readers they become. Just like any sport, the more you practice, the better you are. And the better readers are exposed to more ideas and, lots of vocabulary. Thus, students who really find it difficult to read aren't going to read as much. It's just tough for them. And then they are not exposed to as many ideas and as many vocabulary words. So even though they're capable of understanding the words and the ideas that are put forth in a lot of books, they just aren't experience it because it's very hard for them to do the reading, and they tire easily as well. So that's sort of the official definition and a little bit of an explanation.
Which, by the way, if you're dyslexic, good luck with that definition, right? I mean, even those who are not, it's like, what? So we always need the translation. But, the other thing I would say, just, that made me think about is, so this is a really interesting time we're in. We're back to sort of tech. We are also struggling with the fact that students are getting even better at avoiding reading because they don't have to in our society with our phones that will read to us. And actually a lot of these is a double-edged sword, because that's a tech tool that's really helpful for a dyslexic student, but it also can be, then why do I bother to learn to read when I can have it read to me? Even when I'm sitting at a restaurant, if I have my earbuds in, it's an interesting thing. So psychologically, we are also working to make sure that students and families understand the importance of reading, really reading. And that even though you can listen to a great podcast, you also should read more about the topic. So we, together, not one or the other. And so that's something that's another, back to our first question of challenges, that's a challenge too.
Right.
Fighting for the attention of the student for the skill sets you're trying to teach.
Right.
I know you've mentioned a lot of supports, but do you work with the students' teachers, not the teachers that you employ?
Not rights teachers, yeah.
Not rights teachers, their teachers and their parents to work on a plan too, to help support them?
I can start to talk about something that I think probably Lisa can pick up some more and add some more information to. So I can give you an example. And actually, we have gotten a grant to work with a school on Aquidneck Island with students. So we're actually continuing a project that we've been collaborating with the school on to work with groups of students in their school. But as we work with the students in the school, we are also working with the teachers in that school. And this is a high school level. So we are working with the teachers so that they learn how we're working with their students and how we're teaching. So the hope is it will propagate their ability to do it on their own and not need us to be in the school with them. But in the meantime, we offer that opportunity for the training, and we will stay collaborative throughout the process and keep supporting. And then again, sometimes we might have a conference, like a video conference where we would, or even in person, yay, to be able to check in and to talk about the students' progress and what else will be done with them and what approaches will be used and what materials we're using. I know the school has asked us, what material what are you using for this? And so we're happy to share that because there's not enough of us to go around for all the need. So we love being able to say, here you go. Now that you know how to do it, we look forward to seeing how you do.
That's
Now,
awesome.
But
oh, sorry, go ahead, Lisa.
no, I was just say that I think she covered it well.
Now, are these methods that you use when you go into these other schools to talk to these teachers, are these methods that are specifically for the child who's got the complex learning profile, or is this something they can just put into their regular lesson plan so everyone's learning, but it's I don't know if I'm asking it the right way. If it's
Yes.
No, we get it. Yeah.
Yeah, so it is a learning curve to know how to present a lesson for structured literacy. So we can give hints of materials to use that are helpful or model some things that we do. I think in order to become an expert in it, you really do need to immerse yourself in the class and do a practicum for it. There is a lot to it, but certainly being able to just understand what it is or understand what it is for the dyslexic kid, what it's like to be in the classroom when you're dyslexic or have attentional difficulties, is helpful to teachers, that way. But there is training, and we do partner with another group that does the training, as Halley mentioned earlier, so that we're hoping there'll be more teachers out there who are knowledgeable and can give this type of instruction.
But typically, what we are doing when we go into a school to work with students, we are doing that intensive, more for our complex learning profiles with the schools, because they typically feel that they can provide the other types of instructions needed. They only come to us when they have exhausted all of their own resources and can't provide what the student needs themselves. And so then they go to the outside resource. So when we're working with the schools, it tends to be that very highly trained, specific background that we have. But in our tutoring business, we run the gamut of the types of learning profiles and the types of instruction. And some of what we do actually can be done with less training, but you still need training. But we also, parents often want to be involved, especially with the younger students when they're still listening to you. And they often want to know how we, the type of instruction that we deliver and want to be able to do it too. And that is tricky because it really is, you do have to have the education background and you do have to have the training to understand all the ins and outs of it. So we don't offer parental training, but we do, open the door to parents to understand what we're teaching and how we're teaching it and give them the support information and materials and to be able to support the student at home with the concept and feel comfortable with the terminology. And, there have been occasions where parents have gone and gotten the training and become teachers in that or tutors in that particular training. So it does happen.
What advice would you give parents who either have a child with dyslexia or some complex learning or are suspecting it?
I would, I know that often sometimes people do hit a wall when they try to get help from the school, but I would start with the classroom teacher, and ask, do they see any red flags happening for this child? You know, is the child reluctant to read out loud? Are they skipping words, guessing words? But they like being read to, you know, those kinds of things. I think parents are their own best advocate, though, really. You can ask the school, you know, can I see the testing scores, which I think most schools do. And if your child is reading below grade level, or even in math, asking, you know, could there be any other assessments done to figure out what is going on here? You know, what can we do to help? Is there other help that the school can offer? You know, asking those questions and trying to partner with them can be helpful. Not always will schools be able to help everybody, just limited resources, which is why we do the tutoring after school or in the summer to fill in some of those gaps. But I would start with the teacher and then know that you are your own best advocate for your own child and really look. And you may have to go, as we discussed at the beginning, go and get independent evaluation of your own, you know, if the school isn't able to do that for you.
And I'm going to add to that a couple of things that are a little subtler. One is, you know, also ask if there's any behavioral change that the teacher is noticing in the child, because it may not come out the way you think, like what the problem is, or a change in mood that's really dramatic. And their teachers are often tuned into that because they see that for a variety of reasons. But the other thing is, I would say parents should keep believing in yourself. And it's sort of what Lisa's saying with being your child's best advocate, but don't give up. Don't think you're crazy. You know, drive it to the end. That evaluation is really important. Wherever it comes from, it can be really important. If you think that it's only you, or you're feeling like you're isolated, or someone's telling you there's no problem, you have an outside source to say, no, there is a problem. Or you get the, oh, it's not the problem I thought. Mm-hmm. It's really that, I think that, but having tenacity in the most loving, supportive, most proactive, positive way is the best thing that parents can do. But I also would say, lean in on the people that you know are supporting your child. And it's okay to say, I am struggling. I don't know what to do here, and get some extra help. I also think sometimes parents want to kind of try to do it themselves because they do feel fiercely that they get it and no one else does. So I think it's like, don't close down, and just remember there are resources out there. They're sometimes hard to find, even in our little state of Rhode Island. Mm-hmm. It can be hard to find what you need when you need it, but it's out there.
I'm going to add, I don't know how I didn't know about you guys 15 years ago or whatever, but I'm going to add, reach out to other parents. Like once I found out what was going on, I was kind of a big mouth about it. And so even now, some parents will come to me and say, you know, how did you get her an IEP? What were the steps you took? And
that's really important.
Parents sharing information is.
Yes. And the other thing is, there's no shame in it. And that goes with being loud and proud about it. Yep. Dyslexic brains are wonderful. This world would function far worse than it already is if we didn't have those dyslexic brains at work solving problems in a different way. And I also remember ADHD goes in there as well. And I remember back one summer in our program, I remember a parent, you know, medication is a hot topic. It's very emotional for people. And there was a student that we were working with who really had been on medication as a second grader for ADHD, and said to his parent, I feel so much better. I can really think, and I feel so. It's literally, the child said how good being on this medication was. And the parent ended up telling us, because we were in a conversation about whether he was on his medication, because he didn't seem like he was. And she said, no, because I don't want anyone in our neighborhood to know that he's on this medication. And I wish I did not say it, but I wish I could have said, ma'am, everyone in your neighborhood is on this medication. I happen to know there are a lot of other students in that neighborhood who also are benefiting from that. So it was a stigma to her. and she didn't want it known. And so that's not supporting her child who is saying, I feel better on this, in a way that he could function. So that's an interesting part of it too, to me, is like, just you have to, parents also have to become okay with whatever they're facing. And that's part of how you do it, is to share with others and to get their stories.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
I'm going to give my daughter a shout out just because we've been talking about her. She just got her master's degree. So,
oh, congratulations.
so like we would have, you know, 15 years ago, we would have thought maybe even college would have been a struggle. And I'm not saying it was easy for her, but they can get there. They can work hard and they can get there. Nothing's impossible for them. So.
Exactly. That's great.
Now, for those parents, those teachers that are listening and watching and wanting to know what is the process to get Rights involved, what's the best way to contact you to get the process started?
So we do have a website. It's www.ritutorial.org. And there is a contact form on our website. So if you fill that out, that's probably the best way to get in touch with us and let us know what you're looking for.
And you can also do that when it's 11:30 at night and you're freaking out, and you can just fill it out and we'll get right back to you the next day.
That's awesome. I'm going to be telling all my friends.
That's right. That's right.
Yay. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for the great work you do.